All right, well, good morning and happy Saturday, Central Georgia. It's Meteorologist Ansley Parker here, and if you were with me earlier, we've been talking all this morning about what was potential Tropical Cyclone 9, and now as of just a few minutes ago, the 11 a.m. update from the National Hurricane Center, this is now Tropical Depression 9. So let's talk a little bit about what that means, what the changes are, what the change in distinction is, and overall what this means for our area. The good news is not a ton of changes. If you were with me this morning and I was talking a lot about how this is really steering away from us and trending in a general direction away from us, things are still trending that way. So I'm going to take the graphics to full screen and we'll talk about this a little bit further. So we're going to start with an overview of the basin right now. And as you can see, there's kind of two areas that will probably grab your eye when we take a look at this. The first one, which you'll probably notice is a little more impressive, is this area with a more defined eye there. That is Hurricane Umberto, and you can see it's still a very strong system. Again, a really defined eye. I believe as of the 11 a.m. update, still at Category 4 strength. So that's the strong system Umberto over there, but closer towards Hispaniola, now pushing over the Bahamas, is this area that has now gotten itself defined enough to become a tropical depression. It's actually, I know it kind of looks like it might be all of this back here, but it's actually this region that's now kind of bubbling up in between Cuba and the Bahamas. So this is the area that we're watching here. It's now got its own centralized low pressure enough to be considered a tropical depression. So let's take a look at the cones. There is an update to the cone here at the 11 a.m. update from the National Hurricane Center, and it's an encouraging update in the sense that this new cone now takes into account this extreme eastward push that a lot of the ensemble models are predicting. So you can still see, though, it's still extremely wide here at the end. That means that there's still a lot of uncertainty with this. So I'm going to unpack the changes with the end of this cone here in just a second, but I want to draw your attention to, actually not up there, further down towards the south, to this region right here. As this system goes through the Bahamas, there is a lot of certainty in the path that it's going to take right here. The cone is extremely tight. And there's basically just some really good agreement between the models that this Tropical Depression 9 is going to take this north-northwestward track through the Bahamas, and as it does that, it's going to have the chance to organize into a tropical storm. If you were with me earlier, I talked a little bit about why this has taken some time to get its strength together. While it was actually over Hispaniola, if you're not familiar with the terrain there, they have really, really, really tall mountains. So that was kind of disrupting the system getting itself together. Despite the fact that we had a really strong tropical disturbance, basically the domain and the terrain in this area, really disrupted it and did not allow it to organize any further. Now that wave is moving further away from that mountain range, and the Bahamas are actually extremely flat. So it's really going to have the chance to organize while it's over the Bahamas, meaning that we're talking about a tropical storm as it tracks through here. But the good news with the certainty of this cone is that you'll notice it does not include the eastern coast of the Florida Peninsula. That is good news, and I think that that's becoming more and more certain as we go throughout the kind of preceding model run. So I'll show you that certainty again, kind of outlined here with the current watches and warnings that they have out for this system. So right now there are tropical storm warnings in effect for the Bahamas. The islands here have tropical storm warnings, meaning tropical storm force winds are expected within the next 48 hours. So they are under warnings, watching for tropical storm strength conditions in that area. Again, that's the Bahamas. But new with this 11 a.m. update from the National Hurricane Center is tropical storm watches that have been issued for parts of the eastern coast of Florida. Now, the National Hurricane Center said the reason that they went ahead and did this is just because they say the proximity to the tropical storm, one, is going to probably push some impressive surf, maybe some rip currents, things like that into the region, and two, it could cause some tropical storm force winds along the area that they've outlined. Now, it's a watch because It's not necessarily set in stone. It's possible, but they're saying we're not really guaranteed to see tropical storm force winds in this region yet, but it's something they're going to keep their eye on as this potential tropical storm makes its way over the Bahamas and passes by Florida. So we'll see if that gets upgraded to a warning, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them keep that as a watch, especially considering that the eastern coast of the Florida Peninsula is not included in the cone. And then beyond that, we do not have any active watches and warnings except for, I believe, potentially some storm surge, or maybe it's the trouble that our graphics are having there, but that tropical storm watch may extend into the Georgia coast. Hold on, I'm gonna read their discussion really quick to see if that is the case. So it says tropical storm watch is issued from Palm Beach, Martin County line to northward Flagler, Volusia County line, which I'm not too familiar with, but it does say along the east coast of Florida. So I'm gonna assume right now that that is the east coast of Florida, and potentially what you're seeing here in yellow, that may be for storm surge or rip current, something of that nature. I'll look into that, and we'll talk a little bit more about the track here while I learn more about that here in the coming minutes. So, like I said, pretty good certainty up until about this point with this system. We've got pretty good certainty it's going to move north-northwestward through the Bahamas. Then right about there, which I'll actually just go ahead and draw a line here, this time, which is around Sunday night, Monday morning, is where the certainty starts to go a little haywire. And you can just see that by looking at it. I mean, the spaghetti plots are all over the place, almost 180-degree spread between the spaghetti plots here. And there is a reason for that, which I'm going to break down here. Now, I'm trying not to make this overly complicated, but the reason that I even want to break it down at all is just because of personal preference. I know if I was looking for some information and I just kept hearing that there's a lot of uncertainty, I would really want to understand why. So I'm going to take you kind of behind some of the reasoning here, if you'll just bear with me through some of the upper level things that we have going on here, and I'll do my best to explain it. So to kind of show you what I have here, this is Hurricane Umberto. This, which now is Tropical Depression 9, would be Tropical Depression 9 at around 9 a.m. on Monday. So this potentially could be a tropical storm by that time, but I didn't want it to be confusing, so I've just denoted it with a low pressure system because that's what it is right now. Okay, so we know those two features already. That's what we've been talking about this entire time. But also in the upper levels of our atmosphere, we have this high pressure system out towards the east, and we have a low pressure system that is over our region, kind of the southeastern United States, or we'll be moving closer to that region as we go throughout the next couple of days. So some of the trouble with this forecast has got a lot to do with this high pressure system that's out towards the east. If you kind of remember the track that Umberto was taking, it's kind of looping around like that and then going back out towards the east. Now the reason is this high pressure system. It has to kind of move around that high pressure system. Now this low pressure system out here actually wants to do something kind of seemingly counterintuitive, and it wants to drag this Tropical Depression 9 in towards the eastern United States. So we have these two features here, and as Umberto kind of moves around this high pressure system, it's going to come close to Imelda here, and what it's going to want to do as it does that is actually drag, and excuse me for using Imelda, that was what this name would be if this does become a tropical storm. I'll try to use 9. If this kind of moves close enough to 9, it's actually going to want to pull it in the opposite direction. So what you have in the upper levels of our atmosphere is a bunch of features that are basically fighting for dominance. You have this really strong hurricane, and then you have this low pressure system off towards the coast of us, and they are fighting for who is going to steer Tropical Depression 9 in which direction. So what ends up happening when you have a power balance like this is that it's kind of a net loss in some cases. It ends up making Tropical Depression 9 want to sit in the same spot. So what we're talking about here, and what you're going to hear me talking about a lot throughout this stream, is that this system looks like it's going to end up stalling along the eastern coast of the United States. But something encouraging that has happened lately is that there actually has been a trend in this, essentially the track of Umberto winning this upper level battle. So basically drawing this back out towards the Atlantic after it has sat here and stalled for a little while. And you kind of saw that new change in the cone. That is what these models are accounting for, and that's what would end up having this drag back out to the sea. So all of that is really not something that you necessarily need to understand to kind of see what's happening with this. This is just something that I like to throw in there just to give a little bit of background and understanding to why there's so much uncertainty with this system and why the cone gets so broad. So let's kind of take it back to the surface and talk a little bit about what the models are showing right now. So you know this model well. This is the graph model, one of our high resolution models that we use when we have a forecast that's close enough for us to use a high resolution model. So now we're starting to get into that. Now, one thing that's been the trend with the graph here is that it just continues to show this really slow moving and kind of stalling pattern with Tropical Depression 9. So there's Umberto getting pretty close, trying to take that big swing around that high pressure system, remember, and it starts to kind of play a role in Tropical Depression 9 stalling here in the Atlantic over the eastern coast of the United States. So I'll take this back to about Monday morning. This is just barely leaving the Bahamas by Monday morning. As we play this all the way out to Tuesday morning, so about 12 hours later, just shy of 12 hours after that time, it has hardly moved. So I think that's kind of emphasizing the trend that a lot of models are beginning to think that this is going to sit kind of exactly where you see it now for quite some time. Now, why does that matter? That's important because even if it's off of the coast, that's going to cause some potential flooding implications for the coastal Carolinas, for the Georgia coast, potentially for the eastern Florida peninsula as well. So that is kind of one of the possibilities here. And then what you're going to see on the long range models here is that they have been doing this trend towards, yes, the stall, but then this thing dragging back out towards the Atlantic. So there's Monday afternoon. And by the time we get to Tuesday afternoon, so again, about 12 hours after that, it's along the graph model is along the same kind of thinking as the GFS and the Euro model, this kind of stalling out in the Atlantic Ocean off the eastern coast of the United States here. If we play this out a little bit further, so about 12 hours, a little more than that, beyond the stall, now these long range models are having this big trend towards Umberto dragging this thing back out towards the Atlantic, which is positive. The quicker we can get this out of here and also not have a direct land impact, that would be huge. So that's kind of the trend, although these models have done a lot of back and forth over the last couple of days. So that's kind of where things stand as of right now. Now, I want to mention briefly that we are talking about a lot happening off of the coast of our state. But we are not on the coast of our state. We are in central Georgia, further inland, and it is kind of my responsibility to tell you what the weather's going to be like here in central Georgia. So I want to just remind and encourage you that there's really not a lot that we're talking about with impacts here in central Georgia. If you are familiar with hurricanes, tropical systems, and how we talk about them from time to time, you'll probably remember that we talk a lot about the clean and the dirty side of these systems. What you may have noticed as we've played these models out is that we land on the clean side kind of no matter what the scenario is with this system. So I don't really foresee us having some sort of major land impact here to central Georgia. I think a worst case scenario, we're probably talking about some increased rain chances next week if this thing does track a little further inland. And I think either way, we're probably going to have a pretty breezy work week next week. Now, I use the word breezy purposefully. I'm not talking about tropical storm force winds. I'm not talking about hurricane force winds. I'm just talking about having a pretty noticeable breeze. We may have gusts from time to time in the 20 to 30 mile per hour range. But all said and done, we're trending towards having no real major impacts in our area. So that's what you really need to know overall about this system, and to just kind of give you some perspective and some encouragement. This is just not necessarily something that I'm super concerned about for our area. I'm just kind of taking you behind the forecast and talking about some of the possibilities that you'll hear thrown around as we go throughout the next couple of days. So I mentioned a breeze. Just take a walk with me through the wind gust graphic here, because when we land on the western side of the potential hurricane and what is Tropical Depression 9 right now, hurricanes and tropical systems move in a counterclockwise motion. So we'll be on the western side, which means that we will actually end up having air being filtered in from the northeast. Now, when we get air that comes in from the northeast, it's cooler and it's a lot drier. And that is actually what will probably be happening to us in the early work week this week. We'll be getting this reinforcement of probably some gusty winds. You can see on the wind gust map here, we're already talking about wind gusts that are potentially above 20-mile-per-hour range, but that's not something that is out of the ordinary for us. I think what's really going to be noticeable is this ushering in of potentially drier and potentially cooler air being on the western side of this system. I'll take you through the graph model just so we can kind of see what the potential would be for rain, at least as of right now. If we go to Monday, when this thing would kind of be off the coast, you can see it here off the coast, just in the very, very corner of your screen near St. Simons, Savannah area. And again, we're getting that push of northeasterly air, so we may deal with some cloud cover and some occasional small showers due to the tropical moisture that will be in our area. But are we talking about crazy bands of rain from the system like we would have if we were in places a little further north of here? I don't really think so. So again, a couple scattered showers through Monday, and that probably will be the case through Tuesday as well. But overall, minimal impacts in our area. So I hope that just kind of gives you some perspective of even worst case scenario. What I'm talking about the most, I think I'm talking about, would be some gusty winds and some rain. And by gusty winds, I'm not talking about winds that are going to knock trees over and things like that. I'm just kind of talking about a noticeable breeze as we go throughout the next work week. But I'm going to take you back to the cone before I talk about this a little bit here. This trend towards having it stall here does have impacts, even if it's not a major landfalling situation, because the longer that it sits in this area right here, the more it's just going to kind of dump rounds of rain to the coast and especially to South and North Carolina here. Also notice, we do expect it to briefly jump up to a Category 1 hurricane by the time it's in this region, so that also could push some gusty winds, at the very least some increased surf and rip currents along the coast here. So if you have interest in the coastal Carolinas or the Georgia coast, this is still something to pay attention to, and we still probably are talking about flooding potential in that region. But overall, for the central Georgia area, much different story. So I'll show you the potential rainfall totals here, just to kind of emphasize that point even more. We're looking at the European model right now, and this goes all the way through next weekend. You can see the heaviest concentration is further towards the north, right in between the South Carolina and North Carolina coasts. Definitely some good accumulation on the Georgia coast here, but not quite the concentration that we would be seeing further towards our north. And then obviously here in our area, even in some of the heavier spots, I think at most we'd be talking about half an inch, if we could even get to that. We'll do the same thing on the GFS model here. This takes us out to the weekend as well. The GFS trends a little further to the south in terms of the coverage of some of that rain, but even still, we are well into the green, well below half an inch of rain, and it's really these coastal regions that will need to be paying attention to flooding potential heading into, I would really say about Monday through Wednesday is kind of the time frame that we are watching this system. So I'm going to flip on our headlines here one more time, and actually I guess we have Tropical Depression 9 now. Let me change the title for that just for anybody who's just joining. But hopefully that kind of gives you some understanding of what's going on with this system. Now overall, again, like I said, we're not necessarily talking about something that's going to impact central Georgia really much at all. I do think we'll have a noticeable breeze next week, and then we'll kind of have to watch. I've been saying the rain chances are penciled in right now. In fact, I'll flip it over to the 7-day forecast just to emphasize my point. When I'm looking at models, there's kind of a lot of back and forth about how much rain is going to get flung our direction. I've done 20% chance of rain for kind of the entire week next week. I know we have the fair starting on Thursday. The hope here is that the system will start to move out by Wednesday. So regardless of if it does kind of increase our rain chances, I'm hoping that will be a Monday through Wednesday type of situation. And then a lot of that tropical moisture will be able to move out of our region. But in terms of how this will impact you directly, I would just be paying attention to how the rain chances waver on the 7-day forecast. That's probably the most that we're talking about aside from the breeze. And then here in our area, things should relatively be kind of calm. Now, I'll emphasize that this is just kind of where things stand right now. There is still a lot of uncertainty. This is just kind of the specific trend that the latest ensemble models have taken. The National Hurricane Center has decided to go with what they're seeing out there right now. So they've decided to take this eastern track based on a lot of the model trends that are out there right now. As you know all too well, models can swing in the other direction, and then the forecast can change. Do I think it's going to swing in the other direction and then we're going to have a Category 1 hurricane here in central Georgia? No. But I think it could potentially swing a little closer inland, meaning it could increase our rain chances a little bit more. And if you have interests in the South Carolina coast, in the North Carolina coast, in the Georgia coast, that could play a little bit more of a role in those areas. And if you do have interest there, you'd want to be paying attention to the changes in the forecast then. Overall, it's not really something that our team is majorly concerned about, just something that we're going to be watching, especially because this is the first time this season that we've had a tropical system start to track closer towards the United States and start to have some sort of implications for not only the United States, but also the eastern coast of the U.S., which obviously is where we live. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of understanding. Again, we do officially have Tropical Depression 9 now. I believe by tomorrow afternoon, maybe tomorrow evening, we'll be talking about Tropical Storm Imelda. So if you start to hear the word tropical storm being thrown around, or you hear the name Imelda being thrown around, that's just the same system that we're talking about right now. It will likely be Tropical Storm Imelda by Sunday. By Monday, or potentially by Tuesday in this latest model run, it could actually become Hurricane Imelda. So that's kind of the changes that you could expect to see in the next couple of days. And then we will update you with any changes beyond that. But that's all that I have for you for right now. David Guerrero will be in here at 2 p.m. with the latest update from the National Hurricane Center. They're going to do these updates every 3 hours, and we will be here around the clock to update you with changes. So just be sure to stay up to date with the forecast, and we will be sure to deliver it to you. So I'll leave you with this for now. But thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you have a wonderful Saturday.